Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ed Sullivan. I'm the founder and CEO of Trust Exchange. Thank you for joining us here. We will start momentarily. We have a few people logging in, and we will begin the presentation in the next minute or so. Thank you. Hello again, everyone. As I mentioned before, my name is Ed Sullivan. I am the founder and CEO of Trust Exchange. And thank you for joining us today for our webinar on cannabis-related banking. Joining us today is Ralf Kaiser from our newly announced partner, Integrated Compliance Solutions. Also leading the call will be Tim Wood, our VP of Business Development. And so, Tim, take it away. Make the introductions.
Great, thank you, Ed. Welcome everybody today. It's interesting that prior to our partnership with ICS at Trust Exchange, we would get questions of if we had any expertise in this particular area, and the answer was a resounding no. Luckily for us, I discovered Ralf, and he has educated us and come onto the platform. And so what we're going to do today is not so much a sales call, more of a discussion of, for those of you that are kind of looking at this, or you're in it, or you may be in it and you don't know it, just all the pieces that you should have in place. So we encourage people to ask questions through the text. We'll stop to answer those, and let's get going. So the piecemeal legalization of cannabis and the derivatives like CBD is pretty unprecedented in business history. One could say that the end of prohibition is similar, but remember that alcohol was an established industry prior to it being made illegal. So in the banking world, and banks and credit unions are definitely the gatekeepers to this industry, there is a huge opportunity. But executing on that opportunity requires that you remain on a very specific path. We're very lucky to have Ralf with us today. Ralf is Senior VP at ICS, but more importantly, he has seen the well-executed marijuana banking, CBD banking, and he has also seen the brutally disastrous attempts at it. So he can give you the good, the bad, the ugly, and his experience in this is unmatched in the industry. So with that, we want to turn it right over to Ralf as soon as possible here. He's going to run through it again, ask questions. Towards the end of it, we're going to show kind of a live version of what we're talking about. And with that, Ralf, welcome.
Well, thanks very much, Tim. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're at. It's a real pleasure for myself and to be here, and certainly speaking on behalf of everyone at ICS. We bring greetings to all of our bank and financial institution partners that are joining us today. And as Tim alluded to, we're a firm that we're in the trenches on a day-to-day basis on this very interesting subject matter of cannabis banking, and we've been doing it since 2014. And as a result of that, we're often asked to come and speak at conferences and to do webinars like this, and we're so thrilled to be asked to come and speak with our partners at Trust Exchange, because they've been just phenomenal to work with, and you're going to see a little bit today how we approached some of our enhanced due diligence work with Trust Exchange and what that means for our bank partners. But as I say, we are often asked to speak at webinars and speak at conferences, and often we're asked to address on a day-to-day basis board members of financial institutions, C-suite, BSA people, trust, all of the various divisions within any financial institution that have some aspect of interest in cannabis banking. And if there's a common thread to all of this, it's really an educational focus, as the learning curve is really steep in the world of cannabis banking. And we believe our value proposition in this educational focus is really our real life experience in the sector and being in the trenches in most of the legal states, working with national charters, state charters, credit unions, wealth managers, trust companies, as well as many cannabis related businesses or marijuana related businesses, whether it be the directs or the indirects, certainly as well. And recently, in fact, as recent as June, we held a marijuana banking summit in Pittsburgh. In fact, Tim from Trust Exchange was there, and we had 160 staff, particularly with a focus on BSA staff and senior executives from I think we had about 60 financial institutions represented at the Marijuana Banking Summit. And we also do an extensive amount of seminars or webinars like this on CBank. So we really like to be able to help the industry and help the financial institutions flatten out that learning curve certainly as quick as possible. And so why don't we go on to the next slide there, Tim? And really what we want to be able to talk to you about today is this fact that we, in our communication with financial institutions, we often hear from a credit union or a bank that they want to avoid the sector really altogether. And what we would probably suggest to you, in fact, we would suggest to you, is that this is a sector that is on your doorstep. If you are in one of the legal states, even just one of the medicinal states, this is something that you're going to see at your financial institution quite handily. So let's take a look at why we want to have this discussion as a whole anyways. It's, as I say, this is a very much an industry that is on your doorstep. It is a matter of really even some of your existing clients, some of your existing commercial clients may already be defined as a cannabis related business, depending on who they're doing business with. And we always recommend the financial institutions that we're partnering with to review their client base with that keen eye of existing clients that could be turning themselves into a CRB. And of course, related to that then is having the necessary policies and procedures and the risk assessments in place in order to be able to have those types of clients within your financial institution. And we're going to talk a little bit too about this dichotomy or this division between state and federal regulations. And maybe that's the first point that we should look at, is that we have this dichotomy between state and federal laws that really pose some challenges to financial institutions today. So if we can go to the next slide there, Tim. Perfect. And let's carry on to the next one as well. That's great. So in this situation, we're seeing right now 33 states that have fully medicinally licensed or medicinally made legal the marijuana for medicinal use. Recreational, we see 11 states. And this is what we see and what we mean by having this industry really on your doorstep. So it's very difficult to avoid it. It would be particularly in the recreational states that this is certainly an industry that continues to grow, it continues to expand out, and you just have to be aware that if you're not banking it formally, you may have already some of these types of clients, particularly on the indirect side of it, within your bank. Let's go to the next slide there, Tim. And we're often asked as to how many financial institutions are banking the sector in the United States. And if we were to turn to the FinCEN numbers, it would certainly suggest that there's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 700 financial institutions that are actively banking this space. But we have to remember that these numbers are a bit skewed, because these numbers also take into consideration the limited SARs that are going to be filed, not necessarily by financial institutions that are active in the sector. A financial institution, a bank, a credit union may find an MRB within their book of business, and of course they have to file that SAR accordingly. But that doesn't mean they're necessarily actively banking the space. Here at ICS, we have been active in this sector since 2014. What we would suggest to you is that there's probably maybe 30, 40, 50 top that are actively engaged in accepting marijuana-related businesses as clients in their financial institution. Part of what we're seeing right now too is a lot of interest in the Safe Banking Act. That is one of the pending legislations, and a lot has been written about that. And if we can go to that next slide, Tim, we'll be able to see that really it was introduced in the Senate back in 2017. And right now, there's a lot of interest in this bill. There's a lot of interest in this legislation. We saw it pass the House with a pretty resounding yes vote. But at the same time, we're going to see probably some challenges in the Senate for this to pass there. And quite frankly, with what we're seeing in the verbiage of the language of this act right now, it really changes very little with regards to how a financial institution would approach this sector, and the Safe Banking Act is falling, we would suggest again, a little short in what we would expect it to be able to do to really provide that safe harbor to financial institutions. So next, let's go into what we call Cannabis Banking 101. This is being done. Let's take a look at how this is being done. And if we go and take a look at the FinCEN guidance, which is really, as I just mentioned, the Safe Banking Act, it's the FinCEN guidance that is currently in place and currently remains in place. The Cole memo was rescinded back in 2018. And it was at that point in time that a lot of attention was put onto the Cole memo and the FinCEN guidance. And that was really back in January. And that what really didn't get a lot of attention, though, was what happened next month, where Denny Heck out of Washington, he was grilling Steve Mnuchin around what was going on with the rescission of the Cole memo and the FinCEN guidance. And it was even at that point that Steve Mnuchin stated that the FinCEN guidance remained up. That was the important guidance for all financial institutions to follow. And even with what we're seeing with the language in the Safe Banking Act, that it is the FinCEN guidance that continues to certainly remain fully in force. So how are CRBs being banked today? One of the pieces of legislation that we currently have that is not necessarily seeing a lot of attention is what is called the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer Amendment. And this has been in place now for several years. And this is with a focus on the medicinal market, although there is some draft legislation to have it extend into the recreational market. But this really allows a medicinal related and focused CRB to have protection under the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer Amendment. So it prevents the Department of Justice using any funds to interfere with state legal medicinal cannabis programs. So that's very important to understand with what's coming down also with the Safe Banking Act, with some of the changes around this safe harbor. We already have it for medicinal states with the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer Amendment. And then there's been a lot of interest as well as of late with the Farm Bill, the 2018 Farm Bill coming into play in and being signed back in December. And what this really does is it has a restriction around product for THC content of less than 0.3%. So it is really looking at a common, call it a common misunderstanding, that the Farm Bill has fully legalized CBD and the various CBD products. That is definitely not the case. And right now, the USDA is putting a lot of the rules and regulations in place around CBD hemp. So the Farm Bill 2018, that those rules and regulations by the USDA are being drafted, and they should be in place by Q4 and should be in place by the end of this year. But we also have the situation, of course, that until that time, it's really the 2014 Farm Bill that needs to be followed and needs to be maintained until those rules and regulations come into play. And there are rules and regulations under the FDA, particularly around making any sort of false claims or medicinal claims associated with cures, or as I say, medicinal claims to any types of CBD products. So let's go to the next slide here, because I want to share with everyone just some of the things that we've seen around, again, this Cannabis 101 or Cannabis Banking 101 that we've seen in the trenches at ICS to maybe be a bit mindful of. And one aspect of that is where CRBs or MRBs are using multiple bank accounts. That can be difficult to monitor the sales, and makes it difficult for any of the financial institutions to be able to fully account for all the sales of particularly an MRB. We also see in that similar situation the shell game, or the utilizing multiple holding companies. And of course, in some instances, say a vertical has, of course, their cultivation. They might have their dispensary. They may even have an independent arm for chest security. Well, and it might be the security one that goes and seeks out the banking because they don't look to appear to be anything related to cannabis. That's something certainly to be mindful of. We see stored value cards being utilized at times where funds are loaded onto those stored value cards. Here, of course, we have that question as to the source of funds, as they may not be necessarily easily defined. We also see a lot of use in the industry for cashless ATMs or point of banking terminals. And there's certainly some question marks around that as to how those transactions are routed or defined through the various networks, and they can be potentially a source of masking, of course, then money laundering. So these systems are certainly something to be very well aware of. And with the challenges for payments and challenges for handling the all cash aspects of business, of the cannabis business, we've seen some of the closed loop systems, mobile wallets, blockchain types of solutions come to the forefront to help with those challenges. And the question mark around those can be, are they really money transmitting businesses? And in some cases, again, just the mask for some money laundering types of strategies. Hey, so that's something, just a few things to be mindful of on that side.
Hey, Ralf, we have a quick question here.
Yeah.
How are banks supposed to ensure their clients selling CBD are only selling CBD derived from hemp? and only selling products with THC levels lower than 0.3%?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that's a challenge not only on the banking side of it, but certainly on the payment processing side of it, as the industry has seen. And it's one of the things that our firm is very active in, and has a broad and very strong suite of technology solutions to assist in that and exactly those matters. But at a high level, one of the things that we always look to do is we do an analysis of all the products that are being sold by an entity, and in those types of situations, we have lab reports, or the COAs, the certificates of analysis, that are attached to each product. We also have monitoring, particularly for websites that are selling CBD oriented products, and we have the technologies to be able to monitor any additional products that are added to a website, and then of course attach the according COAs to those. And any changes to websites, we also have technology to be mindful of that, should there be any violations of FDA rules as to claims made, medical claims or false medical claims made on any products that are sold. So those are some of the strategies that we utilize in order to ensure compliance at the product level.
Thank you.
All right, let's next take a look at establishing the CRB component of your BSA AML program. And in this situation, we always recommend that it's important to have the appropriate policies, the procedures, the compliance manuals in place, and that really starts with a good solid assessment of your program, and it's that program or that assessment that should drive your policy overall. So let's go to that next slide there, Tim. And in this situation, we really look at helping our bank clients with their risk assessment. And one of the things that we really like to do and help with our bank clients is if there's the necessity to meet with regulators, and we certainly recommend that early on in this process, is with our deep bench strength and our knowledge in the industry, we take our bank clients by the hand, we sit down with the regulators, and we walk through the business plan. We show them exactly what's going to be done, the entire program from end to end, and really help the regulators feel comfortable with the entire program that financial institution is going to be put into, that they're going to be putting into place. It's also a case of having a really good front end enhanced due diligence program. Not only is that around the pre-qualification and the overall account application and risk assessment for the individual MRBs, but it's also all of the source of funds that have to be defined if any initial deposits come into play. And this is, of course, again, where that overall assessment should drive the policy for the financial institution. And let's carry on to the next slide, because we'll carry on with that theme here too. Part of that has to include any right to terminate relationships with MRBs, should there be a requirement certainly for that, and even exiting the sector altogether around the what ifs. This is, as I mentioned right off the start, this is a sector that has a steep learning curve attached to it, and a lot of training needs to come into play for numerous staff within the financial institution. And there has to be that comfort level, and certainly the overall approval, but ongoing comfort level at the board level of the financial institution. And again, that is something that we assist our financial institution clients with also, and also provide tools and oversight and reporting aspects to assist that with the board. Let's go on to the next one there. The next thing that we want to be able to cover off in this webinar is a bit more about the enhanced due diligence aspect that financial institutions need to undertake in banking this sector. And at ICS, we break this down into 3 components. We have the enhanced due diligence, and if we just click a few more times on that, Tim, all of that will come up. We have the enhanced due diligence that we look at pre-qualification, the customer due diligence, risk assessment, and site surveys. I'm going to go into more details in that in just a moment. And then there's various compliance procedures that have to be performed on monthly, quarterly, and annual basis. And then it really comes back down to being able to automate this and help with the accuracy of it. And part of that is being able to appropriately and automatically and accurately pull the transaction data from any of the MRBs that a financial institution would look to bank. So if we go to the next slide, the steps that we go through and that we recommend that a financial institution go through would be this for their enhanced due diligence program. The first step is a pre-qualification customer due diligence. And that is the ability to really start to understand and get a good understanding of the type of business that this MRB is. And we go and do the necessary background checks, the OFAC and watch list checks, ongoing negative news search as well, and of course through LexisNexis World Check, any background or the criminal record checks as well. So this is a good initial screening and a good understanding methodology to vet the MRB initially. And then we recommend doing an initial phone interview with that MRB to confirm a lot of the information that they're going to put into that pre-qualification questionnaire. Once the financial institution feels comfortable with that, we go on to the account application, the standard bank account application for that. And let's go to the next slide there, Tim. We can click on that one more time. A few other things are going to come up there. And what we really recommend too, and is a requirement, is the site inspection. And there's some financial institutions, some banks and credit unions that prefer to do that themselves. There's also third-party groups that are willing to take that on and make sure that that regulatory requirement is met. After that, it's the very important risk assessment, and those risk assessments should be specialized to the various cannabis entities as well. Let's click on that again, Tim. And we also have, of course, source of funds. This is an important aspect of the enhanced due diligence, particularly where an initial deposit is coming in. We do an exhaustive source of funds to really ensure that that initial deposit is coming from a fully licensed entity, and that there's no legacy cash, and that would be cash prior to being licensed that would come into the banking world. Let's go on to the next slide there, Tim. Once that is completed, that source of funds, and everything is cleared on that, we do a standard welcome letter and what's called a general standards letter. And this is an important part of call it the dual responsibility for due diligence or for ongoing compliance. And the general standards letter does a good job of outlining the responsibilities of the MRB to ensure they're helping the financial institution maintain compliance. So there's responsibility certainly on the MRB side of that as well. And then, as I mentioned, it's really about being able to pull that seed to sale data or that sales data so that those transactions can be monitored on a month-by-month basis, and that's where the ongoing monitoring occurs in order to do the audit work that is so necessary to monitor all of the transactions from that MRB. Let's go on to the next slide. Part of all of this too is an enormous amount of documentation. The mandatory documents to go through that enhanced due diligence around 3 years of tax returns, financial statements, certificates of good standing, articles of incorporation, all the license works, any of the inspections, all of that needs to be reviewed, and it needs to be managed. And we're getting now a little bit, I think we're hinting a little bit more as to where Trust Exchange comes into all of this and why ICS has partnered with Trust Exchange. And you're going to see that in just a moment, because part of that document management is not only storing it, but being able to successfully put it out to the MRBs so that they take it serious, and so that they have it easy to execute certainly as well, and they have an easy way of being able to send the documents back to the financial institution for review. Let's go on to the next one. This is the activity monitoring, and what we want to be able to do here is follow the FinCEN guidance around the 30-day look-back period. So we want to be able to take that aggregate seed to sale data, make sure that data is has a high degree of integrity, and that it is scrubbed and it is accurate. And then it's a matter of being able to reconcile that sales data with the deposit data that is going into the financial institution. And here, of course, we want to make sure that it's $1 worth of licensed sales that are going to match up with $1 worth of deposit, of course, within some variances for normal operating conditions. But it is absolutely necessary to show to the regulators that that monitoring is going on. It's also important not only on the sales basis, but also on the licensing, as well as the types of clients that are being accepted at the MRB. So all of that needs to be monitored. And as I say, it's also a case of ensuring that the licensed entity, when they were boarded as a client of the bank, that they continue to maintain that license and there's no change in their licensing status. Going on to the next one, Tim. As we mentioned as well, any of the sources of deposit needs to be monitored, whether that is the initial deposits around that source of funds or any of the active sales transactions that are going to be coming into the financial institution. It's not only a matter of understanding the transactions from that MRB, but it's also important to understand the transactions of peers or others in the industry, certainly as well. So that's one of the things to when looking at a solution to be able to do that activity monitoring, that you are able to not only look at specifically the granular level at that MRB client, but also what should be expected as a normal operating condition for a similar entity that that is in that geographical area, that is offering the same types of products. Be able to do that peer analysis is certainly very important. One of the other aspects that is really important as well around monitoring is the vendor management. This is not only a matter of know your client, it's also a matter of know your client's client. So being able to understand the normal operating conditions of those vendors, what products they sell, their beneficial ownership, all of that has to be monitored on a month-to-month basis as per the FinCEN guidance. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to our friends at Trust Exchange, and I believe it's going to be Susan that will take it over, and she's going to walk you through some of the work that we've done with them in order to really help streamline that enhanced due diligence process all of that documentation, all the rules and everything that goes into that enhanced due diligence to move it from a manual paper-based process to a more automated process using Trust Exchange. So with that, I'll turn it over to Susan.
Susan?
Thanks. This is Susan. Hi, everyone. Tim, were you going to show a few slides in the presentation, or shall I jump right into a demo?
You know, let's jump right to the live version. That would be great.
Okay. One moment while I drop in.
Hey, Ralf,
All
while
right.
she's getting set up, there was a question about the validating the legitimacy of the lab reports that you referenced.
Yeah, it's that can be a challenging aspect to some of the issues that the industry has had, and is certainly part and parcel of an industry in its infancy. So it's not only a matter of being able to substantiate the legitimacy, but the consistency certainly of them. And we do dig deep into the individual bank, or the individual labs that are doing those reports, and look at their history, look at their track record, and put what we call the necessary packages together so that they are available to the regulators when they come into the financial institution. So yeah, there's definitely some question marks in certain states, and it's not hard to find issues with banks that, or pardon me, again, labs that have put together some false reports, and we work hard to look at those lab entities and the reporting that they do for consistency and for accuracy and for legitimacy.
Okay.
And then Susan, before you get started, just a reminder, if you have a question, you can use the sidebar to type your question in, and we will answer it.
All right. Thanks, Ralph. Thanks, Ed. What I'm showing here is a live demo of the implementation on Trust Exchange that allows CRBs to submit information and for you to be able to track and review that process, and also the process of document submission and review with ICS. This is one dashboard that you will have. Financial institutions typically have several different dashboard views to monitor different processes. Any third-party assurance providers will have their views, and the CRBs each have their own view so that they can get alerts about what's required of them and make sure that they're submitting and complying as needed. This dashboard is tracking the onboarding process, that initial due diligence. And you can see each list is looking at the CRB and its status with respect to that stage in the process. So here's that pre-qualification. You can see right away who has exceptions and who is ready to go. Then there needs to be a review. And again, you can see who's been reviewed and who hasn't yet been reviewed. The telephone interview, really each stage in that enhanced due diligence process is here. Also, what you see are some recent activities around companies, and then alerts that will queue up for you based on activity that's been performed, activities that are coming due, and red flags for anything that has expired, is past due, hasn't been completed. These also get swept up once a day and sent to you in a digest each morning showing every alert you've received in the past 24 hours. That comes in by email, and you can click right into the company to see what's going on. And I'll do that now as well. So each CRB on the platform has a profile, and they can self-monitor their profile and post up the various required documents. Those will get stored here in your files, but they'll also be associated with these events in the profile timeline. So you can see here's that inspection event, the SAR that's due every quarter. You can also put in things like internal notes that only you see in this timeline. And each of these events, we call these events in the timeline, can have documents associated. So here's that source of funds document. So the CRB would essentially fill in the event form, post up a completed source of funds document that you could access in this manner, download, print, whatever you need to do to review it. And those documents also queue up in a files repository. As you go through, you can see there are a lot of different event types, and each of these has a special form that the CRB will fill in. This is a form that shows those mandatory compliance items. And you can see here that the CRB has submitted those items, it's time-stamped, and they've checked off and identify that this information is true and correct. And you can see a list of all the items they've submitted, and those documents will be attached here. Once these have been submitted, you can go in and do a review and also timestamp and check off that these have been reviewed and either found to be adequate, or you can then go back and ask for additional items. And of course, you can add in comments, etc. So this is pretty much how each of these submissions looks. And then these are your rule sets that give you alerts and status about those submissions. So here you can see the account application has been submitted and reviewed. The due diligence, all of those items have been submitted, but they have not yet been reviewed. So this status is still red. As soon as the review is completed, this will go from red to green. An alert will be generated that will let you know that this CRB is ready to move on to the next stage in this process until they have completed that onboarding, or perhaps you've sent them requests for additional information, which you can also do within the platform by posting an information request event. And of course, there are various reporting capabilities around this, so you can look at their process, the files repository, and the ability to share these as needed within your team or externally with ICS or the CRB themselves. That's a quick overview of the platform. I would invite you, Tim or Ralph, Ed, to make any additional comments here. And I'd also like to see if we have any questions about this implementation.
I would just add, Susan, that it is this type of process that makes that heavy lifting on the enhanced due diligence just so much easier. And it's not only easier for the bank or the credit union and the BSA staff in the various financial institutions, but it also makes it a lot easier for the potential MRB client. And it's just so much easier for them to be able to receive the necessary documentation in this manner, rather than a fillable PDF or anything of that sort. So this is being able to really streamline down that process.
Exactly. Thank you.
So everybody, we want to provide this last opportunity to pop any questions in. If you have it, somebody else has it. We are also always available to answer these questions offline. This presentation has been recorded. We will have it up so people can review it if they see fit or they want to pass it on to somebody else. But again, there's a lot of work that goes into this, but the key is to automate where you can, so you can put your attention towards what requires that hands-on work. And this is something that both ICS has mastered, and Trust Exchange, that's what we do is automate. So
there's a couple of questions here at the end. So if anyone wants to type in some more questions, now would be the time to do it. So this is kind of a joint question. It's asking how many banks are currently utilizing the system. And I think there's a couple of answers to that. At least on the Trust Exchange side, we have about 60 financial institutions that are tracking 75 vendors independent of the cannabis application. Ralf, do you have a...
Yeah, over time, we've worked with a total of about, in various capacities, it's about 30, somewhere between 30 and 40 financial institutions that, as I say, looking at their MRB program from start to finish. And some of those certainly put the full monitoring system into place, our monitor. Others more on just the enhanced due diligence side of it. So it really depends on what the specific needs are for the financial institution that we're working with, as to how we partner with them from the enhanced due diligence right down to the system.
So there's another question about financial institutions. Apparently, one of the attendees was at a conference regarding this, and a point was made that when a financial institution decides to do business with a CRB, sometimes their insurer will drop coverage due to the level of risk involved. Have you encountered that? If so, how was it handled?
Yeah, we have encountered exactly that, particularly at the D&O level. And other forms of insurance. And it was quite interesting. I'm thinking of one, of course I can't mention any names or anything, but I'm thinking of one instance where that was the situation, and simply another insurance company offered to come in and cover it, and lo and behold, the existing insurance company stepped up. So it's a competitive market, and where one does not wish to do business, there's a lot more insurers that certainly are. And I know of one group, they have a total of 23 insurance companies, underwriters, that are willing to be directly involved in the MRB sector. Okay. So it's typically not an issue.
Are there any additional questions? Well, thank you everybody for jumping on this afternoon. We really appreciate it. We will, the session was recorded. In a few days, we'll pop it out onto our website so you could review it, ask additional questions via email or comments, and we will get back to you. So thank you again. Ralf, anything you'd like to add in closing?
Just thanks very much, everyone, for joining us, and a big thank you to you, Ed, and to Tim, and to Susan. We greatly value this partnership between ICS and Trust Exchange, and look forward to further webinars or further educational events as required. We love it.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and everyone, thank you, and check out the Trust Exchange blog for updates and the posting of the recording of the session. Thank you very much. Take care, everyone.
Good afternoon, everybody.